We're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the OpenStack Israel meetup. The meetup that was converted to an online meetup due to last-minute unforeseen weather changes. We'll be beginning the panel in a few minutes. We're just waiting for people to join. So just take a few minutes. You can see on my screen the people who will be participating in the panel. Daley from Cisco, Director of Product Management, Cloud and Systems Management, Technology Group at Cisco Systems. Koby Holzer, Director of DevOps at Liveperson. Uri Cohen, the Head of Product at GigaSpaces, leading the Cloudify team. Berezin, the Senior Technical Product Manager at Red Hat. And Nati Shalom, CTO and founder of GigaSpaces, will be moderating the panel. All this will be taking place in a few minutes, so just a little bit of patience and we'll begin. You can have a look at the team and the panel as we wait.
Sharon?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Sound check, we didn't do one?
Yes, I hear you well.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
We didn't get the pizzas.
It's bring your own beer and pizza this time. It's virtual beers and pizzas, but I promise if you join us next time, we'll be providing the real kind. I appreciate everyone's getting on board with the online event. We really wanted to make this happen. We think it's an excellent meetup and it can really contribute immensely to the local community. So really thank you for joining us and taking part and being able to change the plans on such short notice.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm just going to keep saying this every couple of seconds just to make sure that everyone knows that the meetup is happening, the online event is happening. We're just waiting a few minutes for people to join, 5-7 minutes, just your patience. You can have a look at the participants in the meetup, the panel, and the moderator, Nati, Daley, Koby Holzer, Uri Cohen, and Berezin will all be taking part in this event. We're looking forward to a great panel. Just a few more minutes. נתי, מתי להתחיל?
5 minutes.
Okay. Everyone, try and keep your chat window open just in case I need to ask you guys questions.
Ron, can you add Arthur? For some reason I can't add him. What's your Gmail account?
Yeah, of course. Let me see. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my Gmail is RTPRO1.
What is it?
RT.
Just type it here.
Yeah.
It's on the chat.
Yeah, I see it. RT. Hi, everyone. We'll be starting the meetup in just a few minutes. Thank you for regrouping and joining us online on such short notice. We apologize, but certain things are out of our control. Can have a look on my screen to see who's participating in the event tonight. Nati Shalom, our moderator, Guy Daley from Cisco, Koby Holzer from Liveperson, Arthur Berezin from Red Hat, and Uri Cohen from GigaSpaces. It should be a really good event. We'll be talking about OpenStack in the real world and real-life war stories and use cases. Really actionable and real stories. So you'll want to stay tuned. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. We just want to make sure everyone is able to join. I'm also sharing some of the events that are going on. I'm going to share some of the events that are going on in OpenStack Israel. We're planning on hitting 2015, hitting the ground running in 2015. There's a lot going on. Let's begin with this excellent meetup that's taking place today, but we have plenty more in store. In a week, we have another meetup with Vasilev Ramov from Risk Focus also visiting a spontaneous event that we also managed to nail down on DevOps for OpenStack. A couple days before that, January 12th, we have a great event at Red Hat who are hosting on NFV and open networking. At the end of the month, January 27th, there will be another meetup on auto-scaling MySQL database services on OpenStack. It'll be a really good one, so you definitely want to save the date for that. And we also have started the year with an excellent OpenStack training, now open, Juno training. It'll be taking place January 20th through the 22nd. So you're welcome to register for that. You can find all of the information about everything that's coming up. You can even watch this event live on the OpenStack Israel blog. It's openstackisrael.tumblr.com. And you're also welcome to contribute to the blog. We accept contributed posts. So definitely click on that contribute in the corner, top left corner, submit, and we'll definitely moderate and make sure that great posts are definitely submitted to the blog. I think we're going to get started in about 2 minutes. There's really a lot to look forward to. The OpenStack Israel event is taking place June 15th this year, and we'll be opening the call for papers pretty early. We really want to get a lot of good content in, so definitely stay tuned for that. And we're going to be relaunching our OpenStack podcast series in a new and exciting format, so stay tuned. There's a lot in store there. It's going to be taken even more global. It's going to be OpenStack and beyond. And we're going to have interesting panels and a really exciting editorial calendar. So you'll want to stay tuned and listen for our podcast also. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce the panelists and the moderator, and then I'm going to hand it off to our charismatic and fearless CTO. So our panelists for this evening are, again, Guy Daley from Cisco, who is visiting us in this stormy weather in Israel. It's usually quite nice here, even this time around of year, but unfortunately we got caught up in one of the only storms of the year, so we apologize on behalf of the...
It's fun. It's very exciting.
So Guy Daley, Director of Product Management, Cloud and Systems Management Technology Group at Cisco Systems, is going to tell us some more stories on OpenStack. Koby Holzer, Director of DevOps at Liveperson, who are doing super interesting things with OpenStack and production and really innovating in that space. Uri Cohen, our Head of Product at GigaSpaces, who is the Cloudify team, who is also leading very interesting development and contributions, especially around the Heat project. And Arthur Berezin, Senior Technical Product Manager at Red Hat, who also happened to be one of our speakers at the last event, also very knowledgeable in the OpenStack space. So definitely excellent panel. And we have our moderator, who is Nati Shalom, our CTO, who's definitely a thought leader in the OpenStack space, and I will be handing it off to you, Nati, to really lead this excellent event tonight.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Hope you all hear me well. Do you hear me well, Sharon?
We do.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. So I think that this would be a good time for actually introducing Guy Daley, and I'm very happy to have him as a guest here in Israel. And as Sharon mentioned, he's kind of caught up in one of the Omni storms, but hopefully we can at least share his experience. And it's not that often that we're getting someone at this profile with that experience visiting us. So I didn't want to give up the opportunity to actually get and share that experience with the rest of the community here. So Guy, why don't you introduce yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to share some of these perspectives. So first of all, I work in the CTO office at Cisco, the strategy planning and acquisitions in our cloud orchestration, NFV orchestration, for the last 5 years at Cisco. And I've been involved in a lot of conversations with our largest customers on both the service provider and the enterprise side. And so when I think about what's driving OpenStack and you know what sort of issues are people dealing with, I really start with what's the business driver behind it. What are the trends that are pushing people down this path? Why is OpenStack seen as the solution to the challenges that they have? And you know, I've got definitely some war stories there, but I wanted to start with that business context, because I think that's the right sort of place to start to understand what's going to happen with the technology. So you know, let me pause there. But you know, if that sounds like it's an interesting place to start, I'd certainly love to dive in there and sort of give you my observations from the conversations that I've had, particularly over the last 18 months.
Yes, definitely. And Guy, I think that yesterday when we discussed it, you mentioned a lot of things about the the carrier space and why they're moving into NFV. Previous work with Amazon. Maybe you could start with that and kind of see your perspective on that.
Sure, be happy to. So it was interesting. If I go back 2 years ago, just about every service provider, telco, that I was talking to had a public cloud initiative. And they had some version of a public cloud. And to be candid, most of them were not particularly competitive relative to an Amazon. They had maybe a dozen customers. They were the biggest customers. They weren't making any money out of public cloud. And certainly they weren't able to grow the customer base substantially. And then about 18 months ago, there was this dramatic shift. And the focus went from public cloud, and the only conversation, well, not the only conversation, but the majority of the conversations that the service providers wanted to have shifted to NFV. And it was a very profound shift. But all of a sudden, every service provider had an RFI. They had a pilot initiative they wanted to move towards, and they were starting to think about not just the technology changes, but the business changes and the organizational changes that were necessary to support virtualized network functions. And that was, as I said, it was a very profound and dramatic shift in the conversation. And it's resulted in, you know, most of the service providers, the large service providers, the second and third tier service providers, now moving to implementations of NFV, not just as a pilot, but they have plans to roll these out as production, you know, underpinning production services in 2015. Nadia, I think you're on mute.
So what do you mean by NFV? If you could elaborate on that.
Yeah. So you know, it was interesting. So I think first of all, the shift occurred because the finance organizations inside these service providers realized that the revenue streams were not ramping up in public cloud the way that they needed them to, the way they'd been projected. And like any sensible organization, they say, well, if I can't ramp up my new revenue streams, how do I sweat my assets in other areas, improve my margins, and throw off some cash to compensate? And so they looked at their traditional business and they said, well, one of the things that we could do here is if we move to a software model, if I achieve some benefits, I don't have to do the same sort of truck rolls I need to support a software model. I can reduce my operations expense because it's easier to automate a lot of the processes around software, whereas hardware, it can be more people intensive. I can also start rolling out new service designs with different feature sets. I can do that more rapidly, and I can shift the intensity away from an engineering-centric model where my engineers and my operations people have to craft these services and these service instances on an instance-by-instance basis. I can move to a model that is a set of automated building blocks that can be recombined by product managers now to create new service offerings at a far faster cadence. And so that NFV is really now things like switching, routing, firewalling, IDS, IPS, WAN acceleration technologies that are in a software format now can now be automated and combined, configured together to produce a service instance. And this is now affecting the access CPE layer, the traditional services like VPN, firewalling, policy types of compliance things, all the way out to new business opportunities where service providers can actually think about competitors in a partnership model. And I can get into that in a little bit. But let me pause there. Did that answer the question for you?
Yes, it does. So if I summarize it, basically what we're talking about is the ability for operators to offer the same kind of services that they're offering today, but in a much more economical model with better margins and so forth. That's at least the basic of that. Do you think that they will also evolve to offering different kind of services by moving to NFV?
Yes, I think it's interesting to watch the evolution in their thinking. Typically, when a service provider first starts to look at NFV, they look at I've got a service today based on hardware configuration. Let me just see if I can move that to a software model, an NFV model. And then they start thinking about, well, now that it's in a software model, I can combine these things far quicker. I can take services from different domains within my company, because they typically have divided up different technologies at the access, the backbone, MPLS types of things. They can now look at these things and say, well, what if I could combine these into new differentiated service offerings? And what's been interesting is not only have they gone down a technical differentiation path, but they've started to think about the business differentiation. And this is what I think really started to drive the move to OpenStack, because the sort of the de facto standard around the enterprise model of VMware, the licensing structure to service providers presented some real challenges for them. And as they started to go down the path of, if my services are going to start to be commoditized and my customers know that I'm moving to more of a software model, I'm going to be under substantial price pressure. I'm under that price pressure because of competition anyway. If I can't get the right licensing terms for the components that make up my stack, I just can't make the margins. And I think there was a realization across the service provider industry, and there was, we need an alternative. And we need an alternative that we can have some control over. And OpenStack, I think, was well placed in its early stages to be the answer to that.
If I to OpenStack in that regard, how do you see the role of OpenStack in that? Is that only a replacement for VMware, or the fact that we have an open source cloud changes the way we build infrastructure, the way we address network from that respect?
Guy, unmute yourself. I muted you only because there's an echo for some reason when you're both unmuted, so I apologize for that.
That's okay. So I was saying, I think it's the latter. I think what I'm seeing is technical innovation is enabling business innovation thinking, and that in turn drives the need for more technical innovation. And I think what we're seeing is it's not just a replacement for VMware capabilities. I think it's going beyond that. Certainly, depending on which, one of the reasons for my trip to Israel is to look at a set of early stage companies. The creativity and the innovation I'm seeing there is very impressive. And this new thinking, I think, just feeds on itself. And so I think OpenStack and the programs within OpenStack are creating new opportunities, and it's just reinforcing a need for that and a need for that to be expanded out. So it's interesting. I have a lot of conversations with service providers saying, I need to find differentiation. And in the cloud, the underlying supplier brand is no longer, or is becoming a diminishing form of differentiation. What they're looking for is, I need to be able to compete on price, but I also need to be able to compete on my ability to deliver service to new types of service level agreements. So I need to see new metrics. I need to be able to manage new KPIs. And you look at OpenStack at the moment in the service assurance area, which would underpin that. There's not a lot of work, but there's a lot of conversation as to what could happen in that area. And so, this is, an opportunity for yet another program within the OpenStack portfolio to support that.
And
Hi, can you mute your mic?
question before we move to the next panelist, but I wanted to give you first the ability to talk about one of the use cases that you feel are most representative. And before that, I wanted to ask you about given that Cisco is a networking company, and obviously within OpenStack and open source trend in general, and the fact that networking is becoming more API-centric with SDN and with Neutron within OpenStack, how do you see the impact of those trends of SDN, of networking into Cisco business, and where does Cisco fit into that place?
That's a really interesting question, because I think depending on who you talk to inside Cisco, there are some different perspectives of the impact to Cisco or the opportunity for Cisco. I think what happens with market transitions, there are new control points and new points of influence with customers. And I think you've got to recognize these new control points and move your portfolio to those control points. And if you don't, then you can be dramatically disintermediated and disrupted. And I think there's a lot of people inside Cisco that see, we need to adapt. We need to understand these new control points. And the layer that OpenStack represents, there are a number of strategic control points in there. And by that I mean, if a vendor is responsible for the implementation of that in a customer environment, they have great influence over downstream purchasing decisions. And it's not in order to create a monolithic or homogeneous implementation. It's really so that you can help that customer be successful, and you can move up the stack for more value, not move down into the infrastructure layer, as an example, and try and dominate there. So there's a lot of thinking inside Cisco about why this is important, and that we should be embracing it and finding out how we help flesh it out and capitalize on it as much as possible. But it changes the relationship with the customer, and it changes some of our thinking around multi-vendor, multi-service sorts of situations. I mean.
Thanks very much, Guy. If there is a last comment that you wanted to add to that before we switch to Koby, feel free to conclude that. And then we'll switch to Koby.
Well, let me just share one slide very quickly, if I can find it, just to give you an example of the types of thinking that we have, because it's not just a case of can we support NFVs in an isolated modular component. It's really, can we can you see that? Can you see that slide okay? see. Natty, can you see that slide okay?
Yes, I could see it very well.
All right, it says business services on the top. What I wanted to explain was it's not about individual NFVs, and I have a couple of network functions here. I've got a router and I've got a virtual firewall. It's about wrapping these into new services and being able to model those services in a standards-based modeling language such as Yang, and being able to deal with multi-vendor platforms so that if a customer changes a platform, the service doesn't have to be rewritten. And I think this is a good example of the direction that OpenStack will have to go in the future to embrace these sorts of things, because it's not just about individual NFVs. These have to be tied into business services. And it's not just about the simple configuration of a set of NFVs. There's an entire life cycle that these NFVs in this service instance will go through. And what we're looking at is a platform of capability that supports not just individual NFVs, but service designs that are content to the platform. And the more content you have in the platform, then a customer can start building their own services by connecting these service designs together and creating differentiation in their market. So let me pause there. Is that helpful?
Yes, very much so. In terms of the actual services that you pointed out, can you highlight one of the services so that it will become a little bit more real in terms of what does NFV in that stack really means?
Okay, let me just show that slide real quick again, and this one. Okay, I'll let Corin explain a little bit further. He's actually been working directly on implementing this and delivering it to a customer, and it's going to be a service that we're able to offer to all our customers soon.
So Cisco has different appliances out there, not just networking, but also security and some acceleration capabilities. And we're looking, well, we already virtualized most of them. Even our switches are now virtualized. You can literally create a virtual switch in Amazon and interconnect that into different workloads that you have. What we're looking into is bringing those up in an agile and dynamic manner, doing discovery, using tools like on top of OpenStack infrastructure, tools like our recent acquisition of Taleb, where we do. Are we sharing?
Yeah, we're sharing.
Right. Where we do translation between netconf Yang configuration to the specific virtual appliance operating system, and we're looking to further expand this capability to bring up a service. And the service is the following: for example, spinning up a virtual router to be serviced as your kind of access point into cloud, and then doing VPN configuration between your branches dynamically, so creating an overlay VPN as a service, adding virtual firewall appliance as internet access with policy and services like NAT, and bringing up our SourceFire virtual IPS appliances for doing intrusion prevention in real time, bringing up the virtual WSA as an appliance to do URL filtering and category-based filtering and data protection at the application level. All this as a service, and it's basically a virtual replace, kind of a virtual. It's the same evolution that happens in the enterprise, where physical workloads translated into virtual. Imagine the big hardware that was basically deployed in service provider edge to do this type of things is now being virtualized as well. So the same revolution or evolution that happened at the enterprise side is now happening at the service provider side.
Excellent. Thanks very much.
Nati, I just want to make one quick update.
A good point to actually switch to Koby, and Corinne and Guy will probably get back to some of the points and the case study that is specifically mentioned right now. So Koby, you've been the poster child of OpenStack in Israel for a long time, and I think we've been featuring the case study of Liveperson almost on every OpenStack event, to a point in which it became boring. just as an interesting pointer. And then what I thought, in order that people who heard about Liveperson before and don't want to hear that story again, kind of take it from a different angle. And the angle that I thought would be interesting for the rest of the community here is, how do you mature with OpenStack? And I think we've heard a lot of people starting off with OpenStack, and I think that's clearly a trend that is more than a trend. But since you're already a few years down the road with OpenStack, you have lessons that people are yet to learn. And I think your perspective on how to run a real production operation with OpenStack would be very interesting. So maybe you could share a little of the, first of all, the numbers and stats of how your production environment looks like, and then you can talk about the specifics of the real life issues of maturing with OpenStack.
Okay. So Liveperson have been using OpenStack for the last 3 years. We started with Diablo. The numbers today, we reached something like 800 hosts with 4,000 instances on 5 different data centers. We're going to have 2 new data centers with another 100 hosts in the next couple of months. So our biggest cluster today, if I remember correctly, something around 300 hosts, which is our biggest challenge. In terms of maturity, yes, we can feel the challenge when growing up. We see more and more things that we need to think about when we're growing, and when the cluster is getting bigger and bigger. It's getting bigger every day with new hosts and new instances. The biggest challenges were around the network, specifically the Open vSwitch. We see things in scale in our biggest cluster, which we do not see in other smaller clusters. For example, we had an issue with the Open vSwitch 1.10. In terms of scale, we had an issue with the other network parts, the Neutron and even Keystone, when they act differently when you need them in a bigger scale. This is today our controllers are not all of them are yet HA'd. Because of the scale problem. When we HA'd some of the parts in our cluster, we started to see new problems of scale, and in some cases we had to disable the cluster. It's not a big effect for Liveperson because we are our own private cloud, so the customers will not feel a thing. It's only us not able to have a redundancy in the control, which is not a big issue. So in terms of operations, most of the time is going on operating the system itself, adding more servers and deploying the application. Nothing too big around managing the cluster themselves. It's mostly done with a Puppet. To overcome the challenges that I just mentioned, we recently came to an understanding that it has been 3 years since we started, and it's time to try and get some help, maybe to fix some issues faster than we did until today. So we bought support from Canonical only a couple of months ago, and have been using it since then. And we can see that in some cases we can enjoy a faster solution where instead of trying to deal with it ourselves, which is what we did until today for the last 3 years, like I mentioned. The biggest challenge in operations is building the team,
Koby? I think we stopped hearing you. So if you can get back online here. Koby? Okay, Koby, I think that we lost you. Maybe you could just restart your Hangout session. In the meantime, Uri, are you on, or are you still recovering from the power issue?
I'm actually on my mobile because there's a power outage here in the entire area, so I'm on the cellular network. And I could broadcast video. I won't see anything because I'm in the dark. So
speaking of real life scenarios and experience, yeah, safe from that. I see that we got Koby back online. Koby, are you online?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah. We can hear you.
Okay.
Sorry,
yes.
Wait a few seconds or a few minutes. Sorry, for Koby to finish his point. Koby, you were talking about the fact that you switch from using the plain free open source version of OpenStack to a supported version of that based on Ubuntu, right? That was the next evolution.
Yeah. So when we started 3 years ago, we started, of course, with the Canonical distro because it was one of the reasons it was the only distro out there. As you all know, they started with the NASA and Rackspace. So when Diablo was introduced and the Federation was up and running, so Canonical was the only distribution. So we decided to, of course, to use the distro and not use the trunk. Made more sense. There was a Puppet available, so Puppet is something that we know a lot about. So it was pretty good for us to start like that, and since then we've been using Canonical distro. Two major things that I can point off that are an operation challenge. One of the thing is upgrade, and the other one is the team that you need to build for the OpenStack, which are pretty much related. You need good people to have on your OpenStack if it's going to be your infrastructure. In terms of upgrade, what we did do, like I mentioned, started from Diablo. So upgrading from Diablo to Essex, to Folsom, to Havana, and now to Icehouse, which is our current version of OpenStack. It took a lot of effort, something like 2 months of preparations, and doing it over and over again in the lab until we got to production. And this is the very important thing. The team that you build need to know every part, every piece of the puzzle of the OpenStack, get to know it really good, and master it. So this is the big challenge. And of course, you can't find people out there, so you need to train people that you have to learn OpenStack. And it's also a big effort, but a very rewarding one, because when you have your people that are very good with OpenStack, and you can overcome most of the issues yourself, operate the system, and in worst case scenario, now we can even open cases to our distro vendor. it's something that was quite a challenge, but today, like I mentioned before, our sizing, we are in one queue. We'll have something like 1,000 hosts on 7 different data centers, and this is 100% OpenStack for 100% of the services in Liveperson. So it's a big deal for us, and it's very rewarding. We got to admire the technology. When we started only because of most of it because of cost efficient solution, but today we really admire the solution, and we're thinking about adopting more and more packages in OpenStack. So it's something that is taking us and taking Liveperson technology very, very far, and it's all because of the OpenStack.
So just, I wanted to stop you here for a second here. You mentioned a couple of things here that I wanted to make sure that we all capture. So on the skill set side that I think everyone is struggling with, everyone in OpenStack is struggling with, I'm sure both people from Cisco and Red Hat and everyone else would share that same experience. Your solution to that was to recruit guys that are not yet trained or skilled into OpenStack and train them into OpenStack. How did you do that?
So it's not an easy task. You need to have good people that can learn fast and really like it. The basic here is very good Linux sysadmins. You need to have people that really know around Linux and open source and had some experience with that. You can't take just anyone. And when you have people with those capabilities, especially even if they are familiar with Puppet, it's very, very helpful. So they get the time. We give them the time to learn the OpenStack piece by piece. We have
Koby? I think we lost Koby. Just when he was actually sharing some important points on building a skill set. So I'll let Koby come back, and then we'll come back with those questions. I'll hand over to Uri. Uri is here is actually going to represent not GigaSpaces, but actually customers that he's going to speak on their behalf. And the point that I thought Uri would be the most appropriate for this discussion is really talking about the convergence between what we're seeing in the enterprise space versus telco space around OpenStack, and why are we seeing that. So maybe you could start with the enterprise use case versus the telco use case, and then we can talk about the commonality and differences between them. So let you start with the enterprise use case, Uri.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes. I can hear you very well.
Okay, great. Cellular network is working fine. Everything else doesn't, but this is the only thing that's working. Yeah,
Speaking
so
of yeah.
yeah, I think Koby just wrote in the chat window that they have a power outage as well.
I see.
So the enterprise use case that we're seeing is mostly around, I would say I would divide it into 2 use cases. The first one is migrating existing or legacy, in lack of a better word, applications to a cloud environment, kind of trying to take, most enterprises have anywhere between hundreds to thousands of either in-facing or out-facing applications. Most of them are not very well managed, typically running on siloed hardware, and we all know the numbers, right? Enterprise CPU utilization overall is around 10 to 15%, 20% if people are doing really good jobs, so there's a lot of room for improvement. And starting with the cloud infrastructure and virtualization is the first step. The next step is actually onboarding all of those applications onto this cloud environment and really taking advantage of of the ability to shrink and grow the application workload on top of the cloud, because that's how you basically share resources more efficiently. So one use case is essentially onboarding all of those applications and managing them in a uniform way. Along this path, you actually get to really look into each application, model it properly. So it's kind of a good self-documenting process that helps enterprises also build a canonical model to describe an application so that it's not only present in someone's head. The second use case is more of, I would call it like a blueprint catalog. So moving forward, most enterprises want to standardize on specific application stacks. It's important to be able to choose, but then again, it's also important to preserve the knowledge and to standardize on very specific common tiers or technologies that you know that work well in your use case. And what they do with, in this case, is they actually build or pattern the main applications or the main blueprints of applications that they want to use moving forward, and then essentially consume them on a cloud environment. Now, for both these cases, it's very relevant to have.
Let me just stop you here for a second here, because you mentioned the catalog thing, and the guy I remember yesterday that you were talking about the importance of the catalog as a way to, preserve artifacts in a shareable way. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit about what you said on that regard.
There's a lot of conversation around, how can. There's a lot of conversation around things like exchanges and brokerage models and federation, and the idea of curated catalogs and the ability for enterprises and service providers to create services and put them somewhere so they can be easily discovered and then incorporated into someone else's catalog. And we're thinking through the idea of maybe a namespace, very much like a DNS domain namespace, but it's representative of a service design. So you can either put a catalog entry up and say, come to there's a meta model that describes what the service is, something about the pricing, let's say, and whether this is something that federated, so you can and instantiate that service design into your cloud, or whether you'd want an instance of that service. But so I think that was the conversation we had. Does that sort of frame it up as you remember it?
Yes, very much so. And if you can mute yourself.
Sure.
So back to Uri, I was cutting you off around the catalog thing. So just a question on that to conclude the enterprise use case there. Do you see enterprises moving to something like OpenStack without DevOps? I mean, do you see them taking their existing workload and just throwing it into OpenStack, or do you see the move to DevOps relatively tightly coupled with the move to OpenStack?
I see it as very tightly coupled. I don't think it would be cost-effective to build on an infrastructure as a service layer without being able to significantly automate most of your workload on top of it. It just wouldn't be cost-effective and would kind of be counterproductive for what they're trying to achieve with this effort.
And what are the tools that are actually, beyond OpenStack? Once they get the OpenStack environment up and running, what are the tools that they're using to actually get the application up and running, automate the process, the DevOps processes around that?
Yeah, so that's also a big shift in enterprises. So we at GigaSpaces have been working with enterprises for more than 10 years now, and you can definitely see a shift of 6 or 7 years ago, open source was kind of a forbidden word. Today, it's actually a precondition. So most of them would not use anything if it's not open source. Like the default go-to policy is first look up something in open source, only then, they would look for something internal, even if it does exist already. They would prefer to go for open source because it has more users and it's better maintained and so on. And really pushing a fully commercial product into these projects is something that needs to have a very, very good reason. If we're kind of just name dropping here, obviously Chef, Puppet, more recently also SaltStack, which is kind of common in the OpenStack community. We're seeing Ansible as well. On the monitoring side, we're seeing tools like CollectD and StatsD. Graphite is very popular. More recently, also tools like InfluxDB, which is kind of a distributed version of Graphite. We're also seeing a lot of Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana to aggregate and collect and analyze logs and events. So I would say that between all of these tools, you would find almost in every enterprise, you would find at least some occurrence of them. Obviously, the big name that everyone are talking about right now is Docker and containers in general. Most of that is still in the talking phase. There aren't a lot of real workloads that I'm aware of that are happening, but I foresee that happening in 2015.
Excellent. I'll let Arthur have something to add here.
Yeah, I would like to add a little bit more color to the previous point you made about the enterprise workloads and the shifts in the enterprise. So a lot of the things we're seeing now is a lot of automation, a lot of custom applications or applications that require some level of customizations to adapt to the enterprise. And I believe we are at the beginning of a tipping point where we're seeing more and more actual solutions and products that are already productize the automation that the DevOps guys doing right now. So at this point, as I believe a lot of the people actually are doing a lot of the DevOps stuff by hand, but we'll be seeing more and more products as we see today in the NFV world, which is just a specific vertical where you actually can buy a specific product. So we're gonna see a lot more of the trends we see in the NFV world in other areas as well, and enterprise is one of them.
I see. Very interesting. So that brings us to I think the other point that I wanted to ask you, Uri, about the convergence or the relationship between what you're seeing from enterprises to telcos. What are the things or scenarios that you're seeing on the telco side, and how do they relate to the trends that you just mentioned on the enterprise side? And where do OpenStack actually plugs into that?
Yeah, so mostly in the telco side, obviously it's NFV use cases. It's how you take existing network functions and onboard them to a virtual or cloud environment. And if you come to think of it, it's quite similar to what I mentioned, two enterprise use cases. The first one is really onboarding legacy applications. If you come to think of it, it's pretty similar because a lot of network functions were not built to run on cloud environments. So you need to do a lot of I would say orchestration and tweaking to make them run on this environment, and that requires some pretty sophisticated automation. And it's very similar to a lot of the applications we're seeing in enterprises. The other bit, which kind of relates more to OpenStack, is again with enterprises, a lot of these existing applications have some pretty exotic requirements with regards to infrastructure, right? A certain networking topology and storage and certain assumptions about the hardware that you're going to run on or the operating systems. And as OpenStack matures and actually allows you to programmatically define those exotic use cases, it's becoming more and more relevant. And I think that's kind of the commonality that we're seeing here, in the sense that that OpenStack is really becoming more and more popular to both use cases, because at the end of the day, they're pretty similar. So for us as a provider of an orchestration framework, aside from the domain, right, the business domain, which is completely different in enterprises and telcos, if you look at the pure technical aspects of this, they're pretty similar. There are some differences, obviously. Some things are more important to telcos, like for example IPv6 support, which is not a part of enterprises. But in the end of the day, if you look at the pure technical side, this is pretty similar, which is good for someone like us that's building an orchestration platform.
Excellent. Guy, do you have any comment on that, on the conversion between enterprises and telcos and
that was a very interesting set of points there. The one that sort of stood out in my mind is when it comes to the DevOps layer, I think you've got to take a step above where network feature sets are defined today. And I think the telcos are learning that enterprises still require security, compliance, and depending on the vertical, there are some very rigorous requirements that the application is going to have, and that's probably how they should be packaging their services. Is probably at that level rather than down at the I'm selling you a a VPN link or a certain amount of bandwidth or a link with a certain latency. I think there are aspects of that need to be elevated up to a DevOps model, and that's where some common ground between the current telco product offerings and the enterprise needs would meet.
Interesting. I think that's a good point to switch over to Arthur and Koby. I didn't forget you, so we'll get back to you. So Arthur, you're from Red Hat, and Red Hat has been very dominant contributor into various areas in OpenStack. I think that you bought some interesting companies, Innovance being one of them. What is Red Hat is doing in Israel? Maybe you could shed the light there a little bit.
Yeah, so a bit of history. So the Israelis, back in the day in 2008, which is not that far ago, Red Hat bought an Israeli company called Kubernetes, which basically developed two things. One was KVM, which is the actual virtualization technology that runs virtual machines, and the other is the management layer on top of that, which is called REV, Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization. So the Israeli side has a lot of hands-on experience on how to build management technologies and how to build actual virtualization technologies, and obviously networking is a core part of that. So the Israeli side is a core of Red Hat's contribution to OpenStack, both for upstream code commits for OpenStack project and also for the downstream product we ship to our customers. OpenStack platform.
Excellent. And from your experience, I mean, you're probably interacting with customer demands. What are the trends that you're seeing? The main kind of type of workloads, or the type of applications, or the type of customers who are adopting OpenStack? Is that more? I mean, do you see startups adopting it, or is it mostly the big organization?
Yeah, that's a good question, and actually this kind of loops back to what Koby mentioned before. So OpenStack at its current shape has a relatively big onboarding point where companies have to have some sort of skill sets, and not a lot of companies have those skill sets. So it requires some time to adopt and to learn, and usually the bigger enterprise, the bigger companies can allow their employees to actually get over this onboarding phase and actually to adopt OpenStack. So at the moment, we're seeing a lot of big companies, big service providers, big SaaS companies adopting OpenStack as a platform for them, as an infrastructure as a service for their own internal services as well. But again, over time, we're seeing more and more mid-sized companies adopting OpenStack because it's becoming more common technology, and it's becoming easier to install and to configure and to integrate with existing so it's becoming more and more commoditized technology that people can actually adopt more easily.
And in terms of the tips and things that you're seeing that are common across customers, what should they avoid, and what should they, what are the steps that you would recommend that they would take when approaching OpenStack?
Yeah, so again, OpenStack is our product is called OpenStack Platform, and the main reason for that because OpenStack is a platform, which basically you can build on top of it, basically whatever as a service you want, right? You can deliver application as a service, software as a service, etc. Or you can install platform as a service on top of that, right? So there are a huge variety of use cases, and obviously NFV, which is kind of the hot potato at this point that everyone likes to discuss, which is yet another very specific, very particular use case that we're leveraging OpenStack for, right? So again, given the whole diversity that you can use OpenStack for, I would recommend for newcomers to OpenStack to try and to learn existing common topologies, common deployment models that people already are experienced with and have proven that they're working. So working with known reference architectures and known solutions is a good recommendation to start with. Obviously, it really depends on the use case and then the need that people are trying to solve, but I would recommend going to some known and then.
And some of the point that Koby mentioned about high availability, where do I find sources on how to run production clusters with OpenStack?
Yeah, that's a great point. This actually shows on where what's the maturity level and where we stand and who would be the native companies to adopt OpenStack. Because at the moment, we as Red Hat, we saw this. We have our own installer called the RHEL OpenStack Platform Installer, which basically takes care of the specific reference architecture for high availability, which we shipped which is also based on a upstream project called StapeUp. So basically, using this tool, you can deploy a highly available OpenStack with several controllers, and it takes care of high availability of each of the components, neutron center, etc. So you don't have to be like a actual rocket scientist to actually make OpenStack highly available. But again, I believe there's a lot of room for improvement from community standpoint as well, because the OpenStack community is fairly wide, and there are also additional tools. For example, Mirantis's Fuel, which also has some level of HA to it. So at the moment, each vendor or each solution provider solves this problem by his own tooling. But I believe by time we're going to have more and more native to OpenStack solutions coming from Toscar and coming from Triple O direction. That we'll see more native to OpenStack and coming together with it as a OpenStack native solution.
And coming to that from a different angle, would you recommend customers to be contributor to OpenStack, even if all what they need is to use it? Mm-hmm. Would it make sense for them to also contribute or be part of the OpenStack distribution?
Yeah, definitely yes. The price tag on that is relatively, I wouldn't say it's low, because you have to. The development process is fairly complex, and you have to spend time on it to actually get on board. But definitely that's worthwhile, because once you know the tiny details of OpenStack, and it's a fairly complex system, you're able to basically solve your own problems and then contribute your own fixes and solutions to the whole community, which is also pushing the whole project a step forward.
Excellent points. Is there a pointer or something that you would recommend that we could share after this talk, so that people who want to contribute or find solution for HA that you can share?
Yeah, there are some great talks for newcomers on how to contribute and how to get on board. So I'll definitely can share some great resources on that.
So Koby, I owe you a few minutes here to conclude the Liveperson experience here, and thank you, Arthur. And by the way, Guy and Uri, I think we're getting into the free-form part of the panel here a little bit later than we originally planned, but still. So let Koby maybe say the concluding words on his part, because it was cut off, and then we can have concluding remarks from each one of you. So Koby? Koby, are you in line? Yeah, I see that Koby cannot really participate now because he has a power outage again, unfortunately. So let's start with the concluding remarks in the order. So we'll start with you, Guy.
Sure. It was interesting to hear the issues that people are having with OpenStack and the use cases. I think it parallels a lot of the experiences that we're having as we're getting involved with implementations at scale. But I think there's still a tremendous amount of energy, a tremendous amount of motivation to solve these problems in OpenStack. And so I'm not seeing any slowing down of the pace. It's just picking up more and more and putting more and more pressure. But as was pointed out, there is a cost to this. And if you want to get involved in OpenStack, you've got to have a team of developers, and you've got to put the investment in to bring them up to speed.
OpenStack.
So thanks.
Yeah, I want to add a little bit. I think the latest OpenStack was a great example. That this is the year of the and the projects themselves are maturing. For example, from Newcomb perspective, there aren't too many features that are cool or nifty. Most of the features are around making it more mature and more stable and more capable of delivering networking as a service at scale. So a lot of from our end at least, and from our interaction with the community, we've seen a lot of bug fixes and a lot of scale and performance issues that are mostly being focused on. So this is definitely just a great example to see what's the current direction. So it's rather than adding more and more cool features, it's more about making it stable and mature and letting people adopt it more easily, and so they won't actually have to dive into the code.
Excellent. Uri. Welcome.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with Arthur that we're seeing, the OpenStack portfolio maturing and becoming easier to use and install. I think in 2015, besides that, this will be the year where we're going to see or kind of find out what are the leading use cases for OpenStack. I think we identified a few of them during this session, right? NFV, telco carriers providing services to their customers, and enterprises building their own offerings on top of that. And as the core platform matures, I think we're going to see a lot more attention being diverted into the layers on top of it. Meaning how you put actual real-life workloads on top of OpenStack.
Excellent. I think that this puts us towards the end of the hour here, and I wanted to say one last remark here. In my view, I think for me, what OpenStack really brought is a platform that enables me to finally bring network and application together. And in my view, that's an area that is yet to be discovered, and there is a lot of potential there, both in streaming information from networking into application and the way you lay them out, and also from a usability perspective, how you build more sophisticated application like voice services, things like Skype on demand. There's a lot of potential there that is completely untapped here and discovered, and the fact that we have an open source platform to work with give us the ability to actually build a much more innovative solution than trying to plug into a public cloud and get into this black box experience that doesn't really let you play with those core aspects in the networking side. Guy, I wanted to first of all thank you for jumping on that meetup in such a last-minute notice. I definitely would like to see you here in the next time, both presenting in the OpenStack Summit that will be held around, I think, June, if I recall correctly. And definitely, if you're visiting again, hopefully we'll get a longer notice and we can plan ahead a meetup. I can assure you that the chances for a storm next time will be much lower. Specifically speaking. So hopefully we'll get you to a session because it sounds like we're just touch the iceberg here in terms of the information and experience that you could share here, and I definitely look forward for that.
Thank you very much, Natick. I'd love to do that if I can make it back here in that time frame, and I'm certainly planning to spend more time over here. So welcome the opportunity, and thanks for sharing today. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all for joining us. Just one more thing, I'd like to just we are moderating the questions. So here we go. We have one question from Mesh from Cisco. Will the real world be able to keep up with the pace at which OpenStack is evolving? Some enterprises cannot upgrade, rip, and replace each 6 months. What will be the implications when running behind the times? So whoever wants to pick that one up.
Yeah, so if Koby, if the power outage is off, I think that will be your turn, and if not, then we'll let Arthur and maybe Uri.
Koby?
So Koby is off. Arthur?
Right, so yeah, that's definitely a great point, and you're hearing this a lot. Enterprises are having a hard time keeping up and basically upgrading every 6 months a major release. So that's an interesting point, and there are few approaches there. One is working closer to having more frequent releases, which are smaller and easier to adapt. The other approach is making one large, more stable release that's going to be released less frequently. But again, these are areas that we as a vendor and as part of the community we are investigating and looking into, and we definitely are aware of the issues.
I understand that there is in the Juno release and definitely in Kilo there is work to enable migration, live migration, or let's say migration with less downtime of the core components of OpenStack. Can you elaborate maybe a few words about that?
In terms of upgrading the core OpenStack. So yeah, there's been a lot of work done on the research on the upgrade. We have our own guides on how to perform such an upgrade with zero downtime of the application, but there's still downtime of the environment. Okay. There's a lot of code contribution to make the components be able to upgrade while running, but again, the solution has to come across the board, and at the moment it's just happening in several places in several projects, and it will take some time to reach that level where the whole OpenStack environment can be upgraded simultaneously.
Excellent. Given that the question was from Cisco, Guy, do you have anything to add to that? Yeah, I think we're off. Uri, anything to add to that?
No, I think.
Excellent. So I think with that we can conclude, Sharon. And if there are further questions on that regard, maybe you can just take it offline, and we'll answer that obviously through the community. I would say that there is, as Sharon mentioned, that there is a lot of activities coming down the road here this month, both with training, but also a good list of meetups that Sharon mentioned to keep up with the meetup group, and we'll keep you posted. Thank you very much, Sharon.
Thank you all for joining us, and we will be posting the recording, so definitely can re-listen and hear all the things that you possibly may not have heard, or you want to hear again. And yeah, like Nati said, definitely join us. So thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Take care. Bye-bye.